Well, hello there, friends. Mr. E here, and today I'd like to discuss the Arbites, or the arbitrator, or whatever you want to call him, because I don't think that the game can decide on which one is the definitive title, and I kind of think that arbitrator sounds a little bit cooler, but I'll probably be swapping fluidly between the two throughout the conversation, so don't be alarmed if I can't stay consistent. Anyway, what am I going to be doing in this video? Well, it'll be very similar to my last three videos, which if you didn't see them, you can go give them a watch. They represent sort of what I would do, or what I see as the strengths and the weaknesses, the potential pros and cons and the flaws of the characters in the game right now, and if I were made King of Fatshark for the day, what changes I would effect upon them. And so far, I've done Ogryn, I've done Veteran, and I've done Zealot, and I think that we've had sort of run the gamut from overpowered Veteran, underpowered Ogryn for sure, and then right on that power level would be the Zealot. And I think we find ourselves in a pretty similar situation to the Zealot here today with the Arbites. The Arbites, I would say, is a fairly well-balanced class. They have definitely endeavored to bring this class a little bit more in line. He's been given a haircut in terms of power since his release a little bit over 6 months ago, and I think that that has not been too bad for the class. He is certainly, I think, what would be a good power level, a good balance level for the intended game. And one thing that Fatshark will need to work on throughout this year is getting other characters into line with that, because a lot of the issues that he faces right now, as we'll talk about in a second, are not necessarily issues with him, but are instead issues with the surrounding cast of characters and how they may or may not make his role in the team kind of obsolete. But anyway, I digress. If you like this sort of talky Darktide content where I discuss something and analyze it, and you can have that conversation with me and think about how you feel about these things down in the comments, you should subscribe and help me grow to Warhammer 40k subs, or perhaps beyond. And I also want to especially shout out those of you who've been becoming members lately. A tremendous thank you, for whatever reason you became a member. Really makes a big difference when ad revenue is as dog water in January. So big ups to those of you who become members. And that concludes the shilling portion. Let's get on track here and start to talk about Arbites in earnest, now that we set the groundwork for the discussion, and talk about what his role is in the team and if I believe he is measuring up to it, and how we could change him if he isn't. The role of the Arbites quite clearly is the tank, but that begs the question of what is tanking within the context of Darktide? Because Darktide is a game where you can't really take damage since health is a finite resource, and that means that just like straight up getting hit, that ain't it, man. You have to block if you're going to take hits, and if you're dodging, right, or blocking or dodging, you aren't really tanking, because that isn't controlling aggro in the same way that you would in like an MMO. Now, so the most effective way to tank in Darktide is to crowd control, unless of course you are the Ogryn and you can taunt things, which only the Ogryn can do. So that would be the best option, but since the Arbites can't do that, what he has to rely on instead is literally concussing the enemies until they are brain damaged, and therefore they can't attack you, or perhaps more importantly, your allies. And what this speaks to is a notion of balance, whereupon you would have classes like the Arbites, who are less damage focused and more crowd control and durability focused, and then they'll go up there and they'll stop the enemies for a while. They'll be able to kill some enemies, but they won't have the damage potential to wipe out everything. They'll need to be holding these enemies back while the rest of the team is able to deal the damage that needs to be done. And that would mean that if we're thinking about this from like, some sort of like team play balance sort of focus, then we would have characters who have the inverse, that don't have the ability to survive an onslaught of attacks like the Arbites can, and they don't have the ability to stagger enemies and hold them still to deal the damage. They need the arbitrator for that. That would be the role the arbitrator is filling in the team. And we do have that for the Hive Scum, because the Hive Scum is like the perfect foil to this. I think that, in fact, he was designed with that in mind, that the Arbites has the tankiness and the crowd control and medium damage, and the Hive Scum has low tankiness, low crowd control, and high damage. And that allows these two to work well together because the Arbitrator makes the space, and the Hive Scum is able to abuse the fact that enemies can't get to them to deal that damage and hit them while they're down. So that works well because you have a role for each character to play. They're kind of fitting, they're like yin and yang, right? So that's the benefit of having a DPS or like a crowd control tank on your team. And to his benefit, the Arbites is quite useful for teams because he offers a variety of utility that no other classes can offer. He of course has Nuncio Aquila, which is a buff and a debuff for enemies, buff for you, debuff for enemies. He has the dog, which is quite useful. He has shock mines, which are really, really useful sometimes. And then he's got stuff like concussive, other random talents on his tree that help the team to deal damage if you're speccing into those. So yeah, he's got a lot of utility for the team. The question is, does it measure up? Does it legitimize bringing him in games? Should he be considered one of the meta comp? Like, is he one of the best 4 that you'd bring in the hardest try hard of comps? And here's the problem, guys, because, you know, I just mentioned that if the game were designed like an MMO, you would have him up front tanking and stopping enemies from getting to you, and then you'd have at your back your DPS who are going all out, but like if the tank fails, if the tank can't hold the enemies and it gets on those guys, they're going to have a real hard time, right? And that is where the system kind of breaks down, because you do have that for certain characters, but then other characters, namely the ones I was talking about the other day, they just simply do it all. And they erase the need for a character like this to exist a little bit. So imagine a hypothetical team composition of 1 veteran, 1 zealot, 1 Arbites, 1 Hive Scum, 1, wait, is that 4 already? Veteran, yeah, that would be 4. So veteran, Hive Scum, Arbites, and zealot, right? So you've got your melee DPS, you've got we would assume that both veteran and Hive Scum are on range DPS of some sort, and you got your Arbites as your tank. And what would be the downside here of taking the Arbites and replacing him with a second veteran? I literally can't think of anything, because anything the Arbites can do, the veteran can do pretty closely, and there's a ton that a veteran can do that the Arbites simply can't. So we could get another character. So simply say, like, already you've got your meta veteran with plasma gun and power sword. What about the second veteran has a shock maul so that he can break captain shields in like 2 seconds? It's in my support veteran build. He's a shock maul with a recon las gun and focus target. So now you can focus target enemies. You can now provide a second shout for your team. You have another 4 crack grenades that are turbo damage boost. You have infinite ammo, right? So like, we have just acquired a bunch of additional utility. And what are we losing out on by removing the Arbites from the team? We're losing out on some shock mines and some frontline crowd control. But here's the really bummer thing about playing Arbites right now is Arbites does the best when you are slightly overwhelmed by the enemies, right? When you're backing up, when you're on the defensive, and the Arbites puts his shock mine down, he gets his shield up and he bangs it with the mace, and he's like, "You're all right, you're not passing this fucking line." And then the enemies walk up and you slam them with the shield, you knock their asses on the ground, you beat them to death. The next enemy walks up, you flash bang them, you know, you stop the enemies from getting through there, and behind you, your allies are just, you know, shelling out the damage and staying safe and dealing with whatever the fuck they're dealing with. That is when it feels valuable and useful to have the Arbitrator around, is when he is occupying the enemies and you know, getting rid of them and stopping them from being a nuisance. But more and more, what I've been feeling when I've been playing Arbitrator is that I see like 6 crushers coming, and I set up, I'm like, oh shit, 6 crushers, man. That's serious business. I'm gonna throw a shock mine down for this one. I set up, I get ready for the charge, and then a fucking crack grenade goes sailing over my head and it kills 2 or 3 of them. And then another one goes over my head and it kills 2 more. And then the last one gets killed by like 3 shots of plasma gun. And I'm like, Oh, okay. So what exactly am I here for then? Because if no enemies effectively are making it to the team to actually deal damage, then my purpose of stopping the enemies from getting to the team to hit them and deal damage is non-existent, and that is inherently the issue, because we can deal so much damage. Damage has crept so far in favor of our characters that we can obliterate 90 to 95% of armies before they close or are able to deal any real damage to the team, barring situations that are just absurd, such as rotten armor, where it's like one of the only times where you'll be like, oh, thank God, I've got a fucking arbitrator around, because the rotten armor is so crazy numerous that you need somebody that can actually just stop all of it and stop it from running you over. And even like 4 or 6 crack grenades won't cut it. But I personally, first of all, fucking hate rotten armor and want it to die with a burning passion. And I don't personally believe that the only way that we should be able to justify that an arbitrator exists is by making the game try to bend you over backwards and fuck you. Because like right now, if you're playing any lower difficulties, the Arbitrator is a fine character in the sense that he's very durable. So for newer players, that's great and all. But there's a lot of characters that are getting very, very durable in their own right. Like veterans are not squishy at all these days. And to be quite honest, really psychers aren't either. So like we have this character that's ostensibly supposed to be tanky, and he sacrifices a lot of his damage to be said tank, to have said crowd control. What does the veteran sacrifice to have the damage that he does? Because I don't think it's tankiness. I don't think it's crowd control. So, and it's definitely not speed. So the veteran gets to be super freaking fast. He gets to have one of, if not the best crowd control ability in the game on like a 20-second cooldown to shove everything down around him. He can take a bunch of damage and sweat it all off because he can sustain himself through a myriad of different methods. And he has some of the highest damage in the game that he doesn't even have to be close to the enemies to deal. So yeah, this is like just patently unfair to the Arbites, where he is playing with a certain number of, this is like how I think of it. It's like you're building a character in like the opening part of an RPG, and you have like a certain number of points to allocate into like offense and defense. And the Arbites went 7 points into defense and 3 points into offense. And then you have veteran who went like 8 points into offense and 6 points into defense. And you have the Psyker who went 10 points into offense and 5 or 6 points into defense as well. So like you just have fundamentally characters who have just gotten too much power, and it threatens the sort of niche, or threatens the purpose for other characters to exist. And I think that the first characters on the chopping block are characters like the Arbites, in the sense that, okay, I don't need to stall and tank for the enemies. If my options are either A, I could slam into the enemies with my shield and put them on the ground, or B, I can throw a crack into them and put them into hell, then I'm going to go with B every single time. Just a little bit funnier way of saying the best sort of crowd control is death. And we've got a couple, Veteran and Psyker, are the absolute supreme death dealers right now, and they are making these more utility-focused characters not have a purpose. Excepting, Hive Scum has a great purpose as a utility character, because Hive Scum can give them more DPS buffs, and that is what makes Hive Scum's like utility / support worthwhile. Same thing with the chorus, like chorus zealot. Zealots can provide even more DPS while they're doing that, and zealots also provide defense against the only things that actually scare these DPS characters, right? Because the only things that can really actually get you when you are playing these crazy DPS characters are like the really big bosses, like monstrosities and the twins and stuff like that. And in order to get those characters off, you have to basically have the Chorus Zealot. You can still stagger him with a Veteran Shout, of course, but Chorus Zealot can stop all that stuff, and Arbites can't. Arbites can't stagger those guys. So you end up with the tank that can't quite tank the things that are actually scary, the only things remaining that are actually scary to the team. And yeah, that is where I believe he falls down. But again, through no fault of his own that he is in that situation. It's just that, yeah, he's a bit like he's a bit like the classic WoW raids that where players got so good they literally just replaced every healer and every tank in the team with DPS and just did it that way because DPS is just better. Like the DPS was that's just how you win the fights these days. So yeah, let's talk about some specific talents, guys. We can get through the talent tree, look here at how I would change stuff up, and yeah, let's have some fun. All right, well, now let's talk specifics about the Arbites talent tree and point out where I think things could be changed, improved, whatever it might be. Hopefully I'll try to keep this a little bit succinct. I know we're already 20 minutes into the video. I literally just recorded this section and looked down at the timer, and I took a half fucking hour to do it. So I'm going to try to do it in way less than that this time. However, if you are a channel member and you want to see the full half-hour cut, I'll upload that as a separate video for you. You're welcome, I guess? I don't fucking know. Let's start here by just generally talking. We are going to skip over talking about pretty much all blue nodes, just other than to just point out the specific or the non-specific, like what the areas do. This top section here, all about defenses, stacking, you know, damage reduction, toughness replenishment. Great way to design a class. You know, it's not a great way to design a class like Hive Scum did, where literally the regeneration stuff was all shoved down at the bottom of the tree. Turns out that the way that you want to build your talent trees is to make adding more damage the things that you do last in the build, because doing more damage is optional. Surviving a fucking game is not optional, right? So yeah, that's what makes the Arbites such a strong beginner character, is he has all of his defensive stuff front-loaded, and it is very good. Let's talk blitzes here. There's one blitz I'm not going to touch at all, Voltaic Shock Mine. Quality blitz. 2 charges, 3 if you're taking this node right here called Lone Wolf, and when you take that, it has a 90-second regeneration cooldown. I think that is more than fair. This is an incredibly impactful blitz grenade, and it is unparalleled by other options in the game, so it is one of the best reasons to bring in an RBD to your team. The remote detonation blitz is a funky little beast here. The problem that I have with this blitz is that, first of all, this is the dog explosion, right? You have to have the dog to use this, and it detonates immediately when you press the button at the dog's location. The problem with this is that you cannot fucking control the dog worth shit. You cannot tell him where exactly to be at any given time, and that means he might just on a whim decide to be, I don't know, in Kuala Lumpur, and you turn around and you're like, where the fuck did he go? Where was that detonation even at? I swear to God I just saw him 3 seconds ago. And yeah, that happens like 90% of the time. The last 10% of the time, you target this guy on a bulwark or an other Ogryn-sized enemy, and he does a sick kickflip off of their face, which looks cool, but in practicality, it makes it impossible to detonate this thing on time because he kickflips off of them in like 2 frames, and it's literally almost unreactable to actually detonate this when the dog is right next to the enemy. So if you get swarmed by bulwarks and you're like, shit, I want to make this dog detonate on them, what he'll do is he'll run up to a bulwark, he'll stand 15 feet away, which is too far for the detonation to hit, then he'll jump in, and in like a quarter of a second, he'll bounce off of him and go back to his original location. And there's a delay on this trigger, so it's like super hard to time. It's just stupid. The easiest way to fix this, Fatshark, is have holding down the trigger on this ability give a painted reticle akin to the Void Blast Staff. When you release it, the dog runs to that location and then detonates there. Certainly it would have a delay, but it will allow you to specifically target the dog to go somewhere. And yeah, and just like, you know, if he's not doing anything at your side, you would know how long it would take him to get to a location. I think that's, on the whole, one of the largest failings of the dog is you cannot control him outside of telling him to go and kill that specific enemy. You can't tell him to go to this location. Which is a really, really big failing for the dog, because that would be an amazing utility. The Arbites Grenade, aka the grenade that no one has used since launch. The Arbites Grenade really falls behind the other two, because if you are using no Lone Wolf, aka you have the dog, you're using Dog Explosion, because if you aren't, you must tithe all grenades to the Hive Scum. It is legally required of you, because Arbites Grenades are shit, and you would not be using, well, not that shit, but like they're pretty bad. You would not be using Voltaic Shock Mine if you didn't have Lone Wolf. And if you're using Lone Wolf, you're probably not using the Arbites Grenades. Getting 5 of them kind of makes it okay, but they just aren't good enough, and they aren't game deciders, right? The shock mine is a game decider. Having one of these versus not having one of these wins you the game. And this is just an extra pump of damage. So easy way to fix this, add a qualifier to generate these for free. I don't know what it would be for this class. I think a really cool idea that I came up with when I was doing this in the 30-minute version would be to have blocked attacks generate these. So every 30 blocked attacks or so, you generate 1 Arbites grenades. And look, it's directly underneath these blocking talents, so you'd have a synergy with a blocking focus build, an extra grenade, you know, every 30 blocked attacks, maybe with a cooldown or something. Not that crazy. These grenades are nothing special, so printing an extra one of those, I mean, fuck. With the veterans out here shitting 90 crack grenades out, you can't give this guy extra free grenades for like standing around and blocking attacks for half an hour. Give me a fucking break. These need a significant buff, and the best way to do it is to make it a free generation with a qualifier. We've got some talents down here, auras down here. This aura's fine. These two kind of suck. This one really sucks. Ruthless Efficiency has no business on the Arbitrator or on any class for that matter. 12.5% reload speed is useless on about half the classes in the game because some classes in the game don't care to reload weapons or don't have weapons to reload. There are other classes in the game that already have plenty of reload speed, and this would make almost zero difference for them, and none of them are Arbites who, why is he giving a shit about reloading a little bit faster? The worst part about this is that if you are taking this aura, you have the option to take either of the other auras because you're literally either here or here, right? So yeah, there's no reason to ever take this. Part of the squad is almost there, but not quite. The problem here being that coherency is a bad mechanic that does not have any effect, especially for a melee character like this, because we are not getting coherency regeneration when we are threatened by enemy melee units. So yeah, that part is just right out. The only part here worth anything is that 7.5% damage reduction. I think it's fine that it counts as unit coherency, but that cannot be counted towards the value of this aura. Effectively, that is like that's like 10% value of a normal aura, that part. So we have half of the Zealot's Benediction aura and then 10% of an aura. So we are like 60% the value of a Benediction here. An easy way to make this unique and have a cool mechanic to it is to give the dog his own aura. It says he's part of the squad here. Squad members have an aura as far as I am aware, right? Every character, even ones that do not have not reached the aura yet in their talent tree, still have an aura assigned to them. Even bots have auras. The dog should have an aura if you choose this Keystone or this aura, and that aura should be 5% damage or like 10% rending or something like that, right? A damage buff. So if you are near the dog, you and allies get damage, or the dog might be off fighting people, and if your allies are fighting near him, they get the buff. And if you're near them, you give them damage reduction. So when you've got both the dog and you near them, they get a damage buff of like a 50% damage buff and a 50%, I'm saying 50% regular aura, like a 7.5% toughness damage reduction and a 5% damage. So it's like halfway to 2 different buffs, but you're not guaranteed to have the dog and the Arbites right next to you at all times, especially when you have the dog off, doing his own thing. So yeah, that's my recommendation there. Let's come down here to these keystones, the dog keystones, and let's first address the biggest issue I see with these keystones, which is that there's a fucking mod that just does this for you. It's called Dog Whistle, and for whatever reason, that is somehow what my brain has decided is the line for cheating, and I cannot bring myself to use Dog Whistle. I'm also too lazy to learn how to use it, but for whatever reason, yeah, my qualms stop me from using Dog Whistle. I think because those mechanics are literally cooked into the game, and the game expects you to spend 1 point here on Unleash Brutality to get the game to get the dog to prioritize elites and specialists. I do not think it is fair to be able to install a mod that gives you a talent point that tells the dog to always prioritize elites and specialists, and it can even tell the elites what elites and specialists to prioritize, which just to me seems like cheating, and I don't want to accuse you of cheating if you're using it. In fact, I don't even know or give a shit if you are using it. I'm gonna keep cheating at the tree game at the end of Hab Draco, so fuck you. But yeah, this I think should be redesigned to make it something that the mod can't do. I think that mod should be banned. But no, I'm not going to go that far. But make this a ranged priority thing. Make it so that when the dog is, this one right here, tells the dog he must stay within 12.5 meters of you unless you directly order him to go outside. So that way he's always close. Having a dog close to you is more beneficial at most times than having him far away. So give it a smaller damage buff, such as the 25% we have here, right? Because this is going to be giving you this buff and this buff near constantly. He's going to be close at hand to attack the things that you want him to attack. So just say only auto attack enemies within 12.5 meters or within close range, right? At this one, tell the dog you must stay outside of 20 meters, or like, you know, prioritize enemies outside of 20 meters, and then doubly prioritize enemies that are actively attacking your owner, right? So this guy is going to go for just enemies that are far away. He's going to run that, basically he's going to run a screen around the Arbites and pick off like straggling enemies that are hiding behind boxes and stuff, and he's going to see enemies that are shooting at which he can already do, by the way. He can tell when enemies are attacking his owner and beeline for them and take them out with high priority. That would be really cool, but with this one, you can give him that big extra damage buff because he isn't going to have be giving that aura buff being close to his master with this one. In the middle here is Lone Wolf, and this is where we'll discuss the pros and cons of having the dog. I think right now the problem is that Lone Wolf is 5 talents in 1. To be clear, do not nerf Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf is perfectly good, right? There's plenty of stuff in the game that is egregiously more powerful than this, and I think this is a great way to make playing without the dog viable. My problem is I don't think that playing with the dog, it stacks up once you reach a certain level of player skill. And I know that they can make that different, right? The thing that Fatshark wants to steer away from here, I am very well aware, is they don't want to make the dog powerful enough that he can solo clear maps. Because there was a period of time where he could do that because we had Razor Dog was applying 8 stacks and the dog was just kind of cracked, right? He was definitely responding a lot faster and being way more aggressive in the early days of Arbites, and they toned him down a lot in terms of his responsiveness. So yeah, they don't want him to just autopilot clear maps on Malice difficulty and below, but what they have done, what they've incurred by nerfing him in that sense, is that he is not going to be competitive as you become a pretty talented player yourself. Because when you get buffs like the ones that Lone Wolf offers here, TDR, attack speed, damage, increased charges on your blitz, those are stats that you as a player can flex on the enemies. The dog, because he isn't under your direct control, is always going to be a little bit less effective. And that means that they need to endeavor to make the dog generate value for you comparable to this, right? And that's a hard thing to do because these are really good and in-demand stats for high skill, high activity players. So the dog needs to be able to generate something special that you could not generate off of this, and that just means he needs to be more effective. He needs to be more on the ball, because a lot of times, like the dog, the way that he's useful is you can send him to hunt down or to get long distance targets who are barely peeking out from behind cover. But you know what I could also do in the amount of time that I send the dog across the entire fucking room to kill a single gunner who's like refusing to peek his head up? I could just close the gap on that guy. I could bullet slide, run over there, charge him with my shield and beat him down. And, I could have just killed that guy. If I'm being honest with myself, a lot of times I like to use the dog just to do it because it's fun. But, like, I could have just killed that guy, no problem. I didn't really need the dog to do it. So, yeah, the dog really only ends up having use in freeing you from, like, the occasional CC that he can get you out of. And that's about it. And making you immune to chaos spawns. So, yeah, I think the dog should get some buffs. Namely in terms of responsiveness, to get him to where he needs to be faster. Not necessarily make him do more damage or anything, but he just needs to be on the fucking targets that you are on immediately, and that will overall augment your damage as a whole character, and therefore keep you in competition with Lone Wolf. Okay, let's come down here and talk about abilities. There's 2 abilities I'm going to touch on really quickly here, Nuncio Aquila and Break the Line, both of which I think are doing fine and are also really excellent designs. I personally really like Break the Line because Break the Line has 4 augment nodes, all of which just sort of add a little bit of something to this ability. You could sacrifice taking all these nodes and the ability is still very good on its own and get more direct power down here, but these nodes also add a lot of flavor and could augment the usefulness of this ability quite a lot. So you are incentivized to take them and disincentivized to take further blue power down here. Same thing with Nuncio. Good little augments that add value here. Castigators is also a very strong ability, of course, but it does have 2 nodes out here that I think could use a rework. First of all, Bloodlust, take this, throw it in the trash, create something else. I don't know what it is, Fatshark, but this seems like it was not your finest work. No way is 75% damage on every 10 seconds on a 50-second cooldown anywhere near relevant for the dog's damage, right? And dog damage is such a weird pairing for this. The other one here is Blessed Armament, and here's how I feel about Blessed Armament. This class has low ammo reserves already, and you want to have something that is synergistic with shooting. This is almost there, right? This makes it so you can shoot your gun without having to reload for a long time. Pretty cool for like bolter and stuff. It feels awesome to be walking around with the bolter going, boom, boom, boom. That's the castigator stance sound, by the way. And the bolter is the boom boom. That feels cool. However, I can only do that like 6 times before I'm completely fucking out of ammo. This should just print ammo. Simply put, you only get 10% of the ammo reserve every 1.5 seconds. That can only happen. It's only a 10-second ability. So just let players get 2 free shots of bolter every 1.5 seconds for 10 whole seconds. Holy shit, game breaking. My brothers in Christ, pickpocket exists, okay? The wheels, the fucking wheels are coming off of the machine. We can give the godforsaken Arbites a couple of shots of ranged ammo and let him have at least one archetype within his abilities that is actually specifically ranged focused. And that would be actually very cool, because then you wouldn't run out of ammo while you're doing it, as long as you're responsible with it. Okay, let's talk Keystones. Firstly, let's talk about the 2 Keystones that are really, really good. Execution Order and Forceful. Firstly, let's just go ahead here and take a big shit on Hive Scum. This is what I was fucking talking about when I was talking about how shit Hive Scum's Keystones are. Vulture's Mark and whatever the fuck that middle one is, Adrenaline something, which should tell you a lot about what I think about it. These Keystones are universal, forceful, staggering hits, blocked attacks. Staggering hits are not staggering melee hits. Blocked attacks are not blocked attacks with melee weapons equipped. You can block attacks with a shield on a fucking gun with this class, right? So you can get these benefits with a ranged weapon. You can get these benefits for Execution Order, the Keystone that is specifically tailored to using the dog with it. It's a whole paragraph about using the dog with it, without the dog. You can take this with Lone Wolf equipped, and you'll still get most of the benefits of it. This is what I was talking about for Keystone design. What does this do? This allows you as a player to have more iterations, more ways you can build your character, and therefore find more interactions that the devs couldn't have even imagined. The way that Hive Scum is designed, by contrast, is so bonkers brain dead, you literally barely even have a choice. Because, in fact, you don't have a choice. Because what happened is they made it so there's one universal keystone, one melee keystone, and one range keystone. So if you're playing melee, what happens if, let's just say, hypothetically, the melee keystone is bad, or one of the 2 melee keystones is bad? Well, then you only literally have one choice, or go keystoneless, I guess. And guess what? Wouldn't you know, Adrenaline, whatever the fuck it's called, is bad, and so everybody that's playing melee just chooses the universal one, right? So that's the problem here. Well, the good thing about Arbites is his keystones are super fucking open-ended, and let me just give you an example of something that my brain was able to do with this in just, I did it in my 30-minute cut, but here we are at 18. Oh, I gotta hurry the fuck up. I'm at 19 minutes. Okay, let's hurry. So this is what I was able to come up with. Okay, so we got Forceful, right? Staggering hits and blocked attacks grant stacks of forceful. What if I brought the shot pistol with a shield? I block attacks. I get my 10 stacks of forceful from blocking attacks. Then I use my combat ability, cashing in those 10 stacks for 25% strength that lasts 12 seconds. That combat ability I chose was Castigator Stance. Now I can walk around in Castigator Stance. Every 1.5 seconds, I'll be able to shoot one shot of my shot pistol, which has 5 rounds in the magazine. It will replenish 1 round because it rounds up every 1.5 seconds. So I'm able to shoot this and shoot up to 10 rounds in the next, however long, and kill all the elites instantly, because I'm not only stacking 25% strength here, but I'm stacking up to 50% strength here, making these shot pistol shots hit for a bajillion damage. Fun fucking build idea, right? Would not be possible in Hive Scum, first of all, because he doesn't have any of those weapons or things I described, but because you would be absolutely fucking pigeonholed into choosing one goddamn boring ass keystone, and none of these cool interaction stuffs would exist below it. I rest my case. Fuck you, Hive Scum, boring keystone design, try better. Arbites, however, winning on keystone design, even Terminus Warrant, the one that I actually want to focus on. By the way, these keystones are doing great, no notes. Terminus Warrant, this has one crucial flaw. One thing, though, that I do want to say right up front is that, again, we have an open-ended keystone that gives you tons of things to think about, right? Not only, look at the number of things that are going on this thing here. It looks like a fucking Cassante tooltip. This is like 17 different things that this keystone can do for you, and you can add more depending on the level of investment that you want to go for, how invested you want to go, swapping between ranged and melee, and then you add more depending on what weapon you want to choose on the sides here. So these all add flavor to the keystone that further derive value from different weapons and different focuses with the build. That's a fucking keystone. The problem here, however, is that melee hits are too easy to accomplish. Every swing of a melee weapon is multiple hits, so what'll happen is it takes you a lot of ammo and time invested to get 30 ranged hits, for example, and to stack up those attacks, and then you'll get into a single melee combat, and you'll instantly cash in all of your melee hits for next to no value. So the really easy way to fix this is to cap the number of hits that you can do per attack. I would recommend at maybe 2, or if they're feeling particularly generous, at 1, such that you can get at least 15 solid attacks where you will get these benefits, or 30 attacks if they're feeling generous. Otherwise, you cash them all in next to instantly, and you never even get to attack the enemies you want to with it. And that would also open this up to not only being used with the most spammy of range weapons and wasting all your ammo for no reason. And there you go, guys. So overall, my views on the Hive Scum. My views on the Hive Scum. Sorry, I was thinking about shitting on the Hive Scum some more. My views on the Arbites. He is very good. He is a solid, powerful class. He has a role. He has a function. My fear for the Arbites is that as players get better and as the power level of the top dogs in the game remain unchecked, his purpose, his role in life is functionally irrelevant, because if 95% of enemies are being fucking murdered by a wave of death and destruction before they get within 30 feet of any people on your team, then you only have 5% of enemies to fight, right? And you should honestly just be swapping to veteran and helping to shoot them at way out at range too. So yeah, that is the problem for Arbites. It's not him, it's you, is what I'm saying. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time. Mystery out. Bye-bye.